danger of this moment, not just political collapse or climate unraveling or the erosion of public trust, but the numbing of our souls. Tenderness, then, it is not weakness. It is resistance in its most radiant. I don't know about you, but when I read those words, I feel the truth of them deep in my bones. Each day, the news cycle brings another headline that could undo us. Mass shootings, environmental disasters, corruption in politics, cruelty at our borders, violence against marginalized communities. We scroll, we listen, we try to absorb it all, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, our capacity to feel begins to erode. And yet, Trimble insists, tenderness is not weakness, but radiant resistance. In such a time, compassion is not a luxury. It is survival. It is strength. It is the necessary antidote to the numbness that threatens to hollow us out. Today, I want to talk about compassion, not pity, not sentimentality, but the fierce, world-changing compassion that can serve as the very foundation for justice. Let us start with a distinction. Compassion is not pity. Pity looks down on someone else's suffering and says, poor you. Pity places us above the other, separate from them. It creates distance, reinforcing the idea that we are okay while they are broken. Compassion, by contrast, means literally to suffer with. It is the willingness to enter into another's pain, to be present with their humanity. Compassion does not objectify. It does not diminish. It honors dignity. When we pity someone, we may toss a coin into their cup and keep walking, reassuring ourselves that we have done enough. When we feel compassion, we stop, we listen, we wonder about their story, and we ask what structures and systems have created the conditions where so many people are left out in the cold. Compassion demands we not only relieve suffering in the moment, but also change the conditions that perpetuate it. This is the difference between charity and justice. Pity can lead us to charity, which may soothe suffering, but does not dismantle oppression. Compassion propels us toward justice, which asks why suffering exists in the first place and how it can be transformed. But here is the danger of our times, as Reverend Trimble reminds us. We are being trained not to feel. The cruelty and confusion that surround us can deaden our spirits. We scroll past images of children in cages or forests burning, and instead of weeping, we sigh and swipe to the next post. We may tell ourselves that we are simply overwhelmed, but beneath the overwhelm lies something more dangerous: numbness. Unitarian Universalist theologian Rebecca Parker once wrote, "The choice to bless the world is more than an act of will, more than a gesture of charity. To bless the world is to feed it with your joy, to replenish it with your healing words, and to repair it with your labor. To bless the world, we first must be able to feel the world. Compassion begins in the heart's openness. And tenderness, as Trimble names it, is an act of resistance precisely because it defies the training to shut down. True compassion is never passive. It stirs us into motion. The Buddha taught that compassion, or karuna, is one of the four immeasurable virtues, alongside loving kindness, joy, and equanimity. But he did not mean compassion as mere emotion. Compassion is a practice, a discipline, a way of being that calls us into active response. Jesus, too, when confronted with suffering, was often moved with compassion. That phrase appears again and again in the Gospels. And what follows is not Jesus standing at a distance saying, "For you." Compassion moves him into action, healing, feeding, welcoming, challenging unjust authority. In our Unitarian Universalist tradition, compassion is also deeply linked to justice. Our second principle affirms justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Notice how those three are braided together: justice, equity, and compassion. Without compassion, justice becomes rigid, legalistic, even cruel. Without justice, compassion becomes sentimental and ineffectual. Together, they create the possibility of beloved community. What does this look like in practice? How can compassion push us into concrete acts of justice? Compassion is not only giving to a food pantry, but also advocating for living wages, affordable housing, and fair taxation that reduces the crushing burden of inequality. Compassion is not only saying you are loved, but also fighting for inclusive curricula in schools, advocating for trans healthcare rights, and making our congregations boldly visible as safe and affirming places. Compassion is not only lamenting the headlines, but also organizing voter registration drives, protecting the right to vote, and insisting on truth and accountability in public discourse. Compassion, in other words, should become the fuel that propels us from private empathy to public advocacy, from sentiment to solidarity. It is not enough to feel with others, we must also act with them. This is why we say compassion is the foundation of justice. It is the tender seed planted in our hearts that grows into courage, organizing, protest, policy, and transformation. Without compassion, movements lose their humanity. Without justice, compassion loses its teeth. But woven together, they have the power to heal the world. Why, then, so hard to live this way? First, there is the sheer onslaught of suffering. We are overwhelmed by scale, millions displaced by climate change, hundreds of thousands killed in wars, countless lives shattered by poverty and violence. It is easy to think, what difference can my compassion make? Second, we live in a culture that often equates compassion with weakness. We are told to toughen up, to numb ourselves, to move on. Displays of tenderness are dismissed as naive. Yet Reverend Trimble insists tenderness is resistance. Third, we sometimes fear that compassion will break us open beyond repair. We fear being consumed by grief, and so we protect ourselves by shutting down. But the paradox is this: when we allow compassion to move through us, we discover strength we did not know we had. Friends, we do not gather here just for personal inspiration. We gather as a faith community in the midst of a political reality that demands our full courage. We live in a time when cruelty is broadcast entertainment, where lies are spun so often that the truth itself seems endangered, when acts of violence and inflammatory rhetoric against women, people of color, immigrants, LGBTQIA2S+ persons, and the poor are excused or even celebrated by those in power. In such a climate, compassion is not weakness, compassion is rebellion. Compassion is what keeps our souls from being co-opted by numbness. And compassion that remains at the level of feeling is not enough. We are called to channel it into justice. That means organizing for policies that protect the vulnerable. It means refusing to normalize cruelty. It means embodying tenderness in how we speak, how we vote, how we act, how we show up for one another. Here in this congregation, we have countless opportunities to practice compassion that leads to justice. When we have our family promise rotations here at the church, we are not only helping people find permanent housing, we are doing something to push back and help alleviate the housing crisis here in Northern California. When we welcome LGBTQIA2S+ youth and young adults into our spaces, we not only affirm their dignity, we also work to dismantle the systems that marginalize them. When immigrants and others are detained because of xenophobia, we are the voices that remind others that we have always been a diverse community. And to deny or to go back on that is the furthest thing possible from making America great. This is the work of a living faith, compassion that does not stop at the level of sentiment, but compels us into action. Beloved, the barrage of cruelty and confusion around us threatens to numb our souls. But we are not powerless. We can choose tenderness. We can choose compassion. We can refuse pity and embrace solidarity. We can allow compassion to move us into the work of justice. As Reverend Trimble reminds us, tenderness is not weakness. Tenderness is resistance in its most radiant form. May we resist the numbness. May we cultivate compassion, and may our compassion compel us to build justice here in our community and in the world. May we cause it to be so. Blessed be. Amen. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. Namaste. Thank you all so much.